Hello everyone, and welcome to Or This. This is the video in which I reflect upon the scriptures sermon theme for the previous weekend's worship. And I'm sitting here Sunday after worship, reflecting upon the scriptures from November 15th. The scriptures that we used from our lectionary are from the prophet Zephaniah, chapter 1, verse 7, and verses 12 through 18, Psalm 90, verses 1 through 12, and the gospel was from Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 30. So I preached on the gospel passage. It was the parable of the talents, if you're familiar with that. A master gives talents to, which is money in those days, to 3 different slaves, 5 to one, 2 talents to another, and then 1 talent to another, and then goes away. 2 of them do business with their talents, and they double the amount that the master gave them, and the master's happy with that. And the 3rd one just buries it in the ground, and the master is not happy with what that slave has done. So I preached on that, and I invite you to look at the sermon if you didn't hear it already. You can find it on WFMJ's church services page or on our Facebook page on Lord of Life Lutheran Church Canfield. But I preached on was the idea that when the 3rd slave explains himself, he explains himself by saying, I know you are a harsh man. And so he viewed the master as somebody who is harsh and angry and difficult to please. And so he was afraid to do anything with the talent, which is why he buried it in the ground. And the idea that when we are afraid of a authority figure, then we might be less likely to, more afraid to act. And that we might view God the same way, that if we view God as a God who's angry at us and is going to smite us at the first mistake we make, then we might not be so likely to do things, to use what we have in life and to take risks in life and that kind of thing, particularly when it comes to our faith. But that instead, we are encouraged to remember that God is a God of grace and mercy, and God is generous, and God has given us so much, like the talents in the parable. God has given us everything we have in life, and rather than being afraid of God, if we remember God's generosity and God's creativity in all the ways that God has tried to reach out in relationship to humanity, that will encourage us to be able to use everything that God has given us to make things in the world better. Now, it was kind of funny that I was thinking, as I was preaching and saying, about God not being an angry God, it was kind of, I thought maybe there should have been some explanation of why God sounded so angry in the Zephaniah passage, because the Zephaniah passage sounds very judgy. The day of the Lord is near. The day will be a day of wrath, a day of distress and anguish, a day of ruin and devastation. Before that, it says, at that time I will search Jerusalem with lamps, and I will punish the people who rest complacently on their dregs, who say the Lord will not do good, nor will he do harm. But at the same time, we have to understand that this is being spoken to people for whom God has done a lot. They remember through festivals all the things that God has done for God's people Israel throughout, God has done for their ancestors throughout history, all the amazing things God has done. But at this point, they have gotten to a point where they have started to pursue other gods, and so and they have gotten complacent about their worship of the God of their ancestors. And so at this point, they're worshiping other gods, basically feeling that their God, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is not not present or not powerful or not able to do anything. And because of the unfaithfulness, that's why, and the complacency of God's people, that's why Zephaniah has this message of judgment. It's you've already forgotten all of the generosity that God has shown and all the power that God has shown for your ancestors. And you're pursuing these other gods. So that's why it's a word of judgment, to bring God's people back to God again, to remind them who God is, and that God is their God, for them to worship. So that's why Zephaniah has the tone that it has. And in Psalm 90, I was caught by this. The verse that we used as a refrain throughout was the last verse of the passage. It was verse 12 of Psalm 90. So teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts to wisdom. And that reminded me that our days are numbered. If we thought of our lives as, okay, we only have so much time in our life, God has given us this life, but God gives us only so much time, that maybe that would have an impact on what we do with our lives. Maybe we wouldn't get complacent. Maybe we would remember, first of all, that the life is a gift from God, and no other God except the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who died on the cross in Jesus, has given us this life, and that is the God that we worship, and that is the God that we want to tell others about, and so that they too might live knowing of the generosity of our God. And so in this way, then, we would use our lives, the whole of our lives, all the different aspects of our lives. We would use that to be able to help people, and then say, I do this because of what God has first done for me, using our talents, if you will, using our abilities. But we use these and we do these things to reach out to others, because we know that God is so generous with giving us life and giving us all that we have. That, I mean, first of all, when you get such great gifts, there's nothing other than gratitude that you could possibly have, because we didn't earn any of it. But then, in feeling the gratitude towards God, it's something we want others to share in too. And so we look for ways to share what we have, and in doing so, remember that it is all a gift from God, that we don't take any of it with us when we leave. And so we share our money, and we share our food, we share our faith, we look for ways to share safety. There's so much more that we can look to. So many, I encourage you to list things that we can share in our lives with others, and in this way celebrate all the good gifts that God has given us. So my mind kind of went in a lot of different places with the scriptures after I wrote the sermon. So I'd be interested to hear where your mind goes when you heard the scriptures this morning, heard the sermon, what you think about what I just said. I'm not getting any comments, and I would really like to hear from you. So please include your comments either here on YouTube after you watch the video, or on Facebook, our Facebook page or group. And God bless you all, and thanks for listening.